Hey, I just wanted to hop on here, make a real quick video, short video about how I think that like biodiesel or renewable diesel has a place in the future and exploring the exact chemistry behind it. Because, first of all, because people sometimes I see here and there people saying like electric, like all vehicles in the future are going to be electric, or like more and more things are going to be electric, and that like trucks are going to be electric, all the trucks and whatnot, trains and all that will be electric. And I understand their opinion, but I think they're a little too narrow sighted, and I think they need to consider all different options, right? Because if I say that I think there's like a place for biodiesel in the future, I'm not necessarily saying everything's going to be biodiesel. I just mean the because you got to think about supply. The more things that supply biodiesel, the more things are going to be powered with biodiesel, or that'll affect the price. And it's just because you're always going to have, usually, I'll explain, you're usually going to have at least some small amount of very cheap, um, sustainable diesel source, as well as with other sources of other things, other fuels. And so I just want to explain that because to me, because like I think you're always going to have a source of biodiesel, or if you want to, like, I think the proper term would be hydrogenate it, like just turn it into, I think, renewable diesel. Um, it would be used cooking oil. This is an established thing. Um, if you really look into it, it's an established thing. People have been doing this for decades. They take used cooking oil, they filter it, and then they put it in their a specific kind of diesel engine, and they use it, and it cuts their fuel prices. And that's just straight oil, right? And they use it, they get it for almost free usually, because used cooking oil, it's just a waste product, and you don't really need to process it very much, right? You just filter it. um and so people have been doing this for a while, right? And there's farmers in like Europe who also do, like, I think it's sunflower oil they put in their tractors when the harvest season runs a little bit too long, right? So I think you're always going to have that used cooking oil as a waste product, and I don't really understand why, at least where I am, because I'm in the right now I'm in northeast North America, or America, like United States, and I don't really understand why we don't mix, um, at the very least, the used cooking oil derived biodiesel into the ultra low sulfur diesel that is sold at pumps, because like a 2% mixture, um because it wouldn't, I mean, that wouldn't really make it much of a difference in terms of like pollution, but I think it could make a difference in terms of like cetane number. It could make a difference in terms of lubrication. I mean, from what I understand, any biodiesel has lubricating properties, and it breaks up a lot of the gunk that petrodiesel leaves behind. So I think there's always a benefit to using at least a little bit of biodiesel, but I mean, I could be wrong, right? But I think I think there's a lot of things that could be turned into biodiesel, because a lot of people, they just think of used cooking oil, and you grow crops like canola or soy to use as biodiesel. And people, I've seen the argument where, you can't, if you wanted to use more biodiesel, I mean, you would need to expand the farmland and use more farmland for biodiesel, and that would increase the cost of food. But I think instead of doing that, there's lots of different ways you can get biodiesel. Now, granted, they might not be very cost efficient, um, but I think at the end of the day, there's still a lot of ways to make biodiesel. Um, so I think one idea that I have is that, animals, you can probably find an animal that will convert almost any material into animal product, right? And I don't just mean like cows and chickens. I mean like black soldier flies, mealworms, waxworms, um, and I mean even like bacteria or fungi, right? Now fungi don't really have much because you have two different kind of energy sources, right? You have the even like you have the numbers of two carbon number compounds, which are usually sugars, and then you have the three carbon compounds, which are fats, right? Wait, no, I mixed that up. It's three carbons are sugars, two carbons are fats. And the thing is, because animals will use fat as a energy reserve, animals across the spectrum use fat to store energy. Now you can so if you're talking about like plants, if you're getting like carbohydrates, you can turn that into ethanol, and ethanol isn't as good as biodiesel because it takes more processing. It's more expensive to process and it's less energy dense, right? It's an octane booster and it produces less pollution. I get that, but I mean biodiesel is a cetane booster and it does produce less pollution, unless you're looking at certain kinds of biodiesel might make more nitrogen oxides, but at the end of the day you're going to get less soot from biodiesel as compared to petrodiesel, less soot, less sulfur, right? um, so the thing is, I think on top of like growing like small amounts of like soy or canola, palm oil to make biodiesel, um, you can do that, but you can also, like for instance, sewage or animal bedding, feed it to something like black soldier flies. Black soldier flies are what I focused on, but I'm sure there's plenty of like animals that would process animal bedding and sewage into fat because the black soldier flies, they're very fatty. So if you find an economic way of doing that, maybe just do it during the summer in warmer when it's warmer weather. Maybe you can get black soldier flies to convert, animal bedding, manure, sewage, or maybe like milk waste, or maybe waste from restaurants, right? Any kind of food waste from restaurants, you can always collect that. You could separate the oils from that food waste, and then, or you could separate the carbohydrates as well, turn that into ethanol. But then that food waste you can send to like black soldier flies, or you can make food production as well, right? Like you can use the black soldier flies for feeding like poultry, or you can feed the like food waste from restaurants to chickens or something like that, right? Um, make eggs and stuff, right? But you're gonna have that, and that's another thing for, like food waste from restaurants. You can always collect that, and that's another source of biodiesel. I mean, you can always convert. Say you get like a specific kind of termite or something, maybe you could figure out how to get wood to process into insect oil, right? And you can turn that into biodiesel, um, right? Like grass. I mean, obviously, you can always feed grass to like a cow, and any kind of like animal fat or milk they produce. You like skim the cream off, make that into biodiesel. I'm not saying that's a good idea. It's just possible, and I mean, you could always, like, I think if you set it up the right way, you could have milk waste or cheese waste or cream waste or something. Small amounts of that, very small amounts, turn into biodiesel if that's economically viable, right? And you can also always, like, in the more near future, not the far future, but the near future, you can always turn, like, petroleum derived plastics, or other things that are petroleum derived, into other products. Like, in my opinion, like, if you look at, like, the structure of polyethylene, polypropylene, um, you can turn those into any chain length of alkane or isoalkanes, right? So you could turn polyethylene into gasoline, so, like, make it like octane, septane, butane. You can make it into, like, decane, cetane for diesel. You could also make it into maybe propane. You just need the hydrogen, which you can use electricity for. You can use natural gas for, um, right? And yeah, and I mean, that's another way you could use diesel, though, because I've heard you can use dimethyl ether for a modified diesel engine, and again, that's currently more expensive. But I mean, you can make methanol out of electricity and any kind of carbon source, theoretically, right? Um, so and that's another thing. People usually say, like, you can, it's inefficient to directly capture carbon dioxide to turn that into methanol, but I don't think you need to do that. You can still be sustainable. Just take any kind of carbon source. You could take, like, corn stalks, that cellulose. You could bombard that with hydrogen, electricity, same thing. Electricity, convert that into methanol. You could take wood, bombard that with electricity. In the right context, that's theoretically possible, right? Um, so yeah, and I think, I mean, if you really, really think about it, I think there's a way to turn almost anything into diesel. But then for gasoline, I think it's a lot less viable to make anything that can be used in a gasoline engine, because you have methanol, you have ethanol, you have like short chained alcohols, and then shorter chained alkanes. But, and again, I think you could reuse plastic waste, turn it into gasoline, but, and then using any kind of carbohydrate source to turn into ethanol. But I mean, at the end of the day, I don't see many ways to make ethanol viably. So I get why it's easier to just go with electricity, but I think it can be very, um, I think, to include small amounts of biodiesel in the view of things, I think that would work very well. And where I'm currently living in northeastern America, I say that because I used to live in Canada for like 2.5 years. I just say that because, like, in America and Canada, we don't really have diesel engines very much, at least for passenger cars. We have trains and we have semi trucks, but those run on, like, petrodiesel. And so, and then you have red diesel, which I totally understand. Use red diesel because it's cheaper. That supports, like, the entire economy. But, like, I mean, that's kind of the thing, though. That's my point, though. Um, the I feel like a lot of the economy, a lot of goods go on the backbone of red diesel, which, if you don't know what red diesel is, it's petroleum diesel that isn't taxed for road purposes. And from what I understand, it also has a higher, like, it's less refined, so that makes it even cheaper. Like, it has higher sulfur amounts, maybe lower cetane. I'm not really sure. But this red diesel, it's designed to be very cheap, and that's kind of my point. Is there's so many things based on red diesel. You have mining equipment because you can't make electric batteries without mining equipment, right? Or some kind of equipment run on diesel. You have agricultural vehicles run on diesel, so you're not going to get your ethanol without diesel. You know, you're not going to have your semi trucks without diesel. You're not going to have your trains without diesel. And yes, people are trying to electrify semi trucks, some trains, but you're still going to have, it's very impractical to have like mining equipment, at least in my opinion. It sounds very impractical to have mining equipment, agricultural equipment run on electricity because you're going to need a very large amount of electricity going to that area, and it doesn't make sense to go back and forth refill on electricity when you need this mining or agricultural equipment constantly running. So I think realistically, you're going forward into the future, you're going to have all these diesel engines meant to run on red diesel, for like off-road purposes especially. You're going to have all this diesel equipment. What are you going to replace that with? Can't replace it with ethanol. Can't replace it with electricity. Both those things also just have way too short of a energy density, right? The most practical use would be some kind of biodiesel, renewable diesel, or something like that, right? And yeah, you're still going to get a price increase because biodiesel for a while is probably going to be more expensive than red diesel. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're still going to have these. I mean, maybe you can figure out maybe if petrodiesel increased in price too much, maybe you could start mixing red diesel with or replacing it with used cooking oil, since that's the cheapest form of biodiesel, renewable diesel, right? So you can just and right, and it just seems most practical to me, but I don't see anyone talking about this. Like I think like some people say that like electric is more environmentally friendly, and that is true to an extent, but you're also using these lithium batteries, and to a lesser extent like nickel batteries and even lead batteries. If you don't recycle nickel and lead batteries, like that lead can leach into the environment. I'm sure nickel isn't great for the environment either. I support like lead and nickel batteries because they are recyclable. Lithium's not, and lithium's well known to not be very environmentally friendly because again, lithium requires lots of red diesel to make. So, um, why not just use that diesel, right? Instead of wasting a bunch of petroleum diesel to make batteries, just use biodiesel. And you could easily just buy us, like, as an individual person, you could just buy a like something like a instead of buying an electric vehicle, you could buy a diesel vehicle, or even like a diesel generator, and run that diesel generator on filtered used cooking oil and red diesel, right? Which is something I've considered before, but I don't really need a generator right now. But it's just things to think about, right? And I think like I'm sure you could realistically claim that if you really want like low pollution to be better for the environment, if you really care about that, I'm sure you could realistically claim that a diesel vehicle run on biodiesel is actually better for the environment than a lithium battery powered vehicle. That's just my thought. Thanks for listening.